Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3-Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
And I'm Will Terry. And Lee White is not here right now because he is doing something else. We call it out on assignment. We don't really know exactly what he's doing right now, but we know it's important.
It's very important, whatever he's doing. Probably Kickstarter stuff. No, but today we have a real special treat. We interviewed Tom Richmond, who is a caricature artist, professional caricature artist, who has been working for, what did he say? His first gig was in 1985 as a
I don't remember the exact year, but yeah, it was around there.
Yeah. So he's been working for 30 plus years doing caricature art from the broad range, the spectrum of caricature art. And we talked about that in our last episode on caricature art, how you have on one end, there's, the live drawing, people sitting in front of you at like a Six Flags, and you get a draw, you're drawing them in 5 minutes. To the other end of the spectrum, which is like political cartoons or illustrations you're doing for publications. And he's done everything in between. It was a fascinating conversation that we had with him. I want you to check out his work. It's good to have this, either to be looking at it while you're listening, or to just if you don't know about his work or you haven't seen it, to go check it out. I want you to go to tomrichmond.com. It's TOMRICHMOND.com, or follow him on Instagram. His Instagram account is art4mad, ART, the number 4 MAD. You'll see a lot of the work that he's done for Mad, that he's done for other publications as well. His caricatures are top notch. I love them. And one thing he didn't mention in it, there's also this, if caricature is your thing or something you're wanting to get into, something you might want to look into is the International Society of Caricature Artists, or ISCA. They've got a website, and you should look into that and check that out. That's it's a society all about helping people in this profession get better at it, get work, and do things like that. So I would check that out. Some of the things we talked about in this episode are how the pandemic changed the caricature industry. Like I said, the full spectrum of caricature art. He gets in and kind of defines what to do and how to do it. He tells us how to break into doing caricature work. He talks about, we get into the business side of it, like what percentage you should be making from, if you're doing caricature art at a booth at a theme park, how not to get taken advantage of, and how to get at it. How long a caricature should last, like what's the standard for how to do in a caricature. And then the balance too between the performance side of it and also the artistic side of it. So it's a good discussion. Buckle up. Here we go. We're going to talk to Tom Richmond. Tom, thank you for joining us today. I kind of want to, before we get into like background and everything with you, because I'm really curious about how you got to where you are. I'm actually really interested in the state of the caricature industry right now. Essentially the guys, the girls, whoever's working caricature, who do what you're doing. What are the jobs? Who's getting work? How are they getting work? And I just want you to like paint that picture for us.
Well, I guess it depends on what world you're talking about. There's all sorts of different ways to make a living as a caricaturist. You can draw at, parties and that sort of thing. I used to do that. That's how I got started doing caricature. And then, now I do most of my work is for publications or media or whatever. But the world of the world of caricature art is doing pretty well right now. I think it's coming back from the pandemic. Most of the live caricature artists, like most people, were forced to switch to a virtual solution. to do their work. And a lot of them have found it to be quite a successful way to do it. And so rather than going out to trade shows or going out to, bar mitzvahs or birthday parties or corporate functions or wherever they would ordinarily draw live caricatures, they do it virtually. And then they email people the drawings and stuff like that. So they were sort of pushed into doing that. Now the live work is coming back. Theme parks are open back up, and fairs and festivals and places that you would ordinarily see live caricature artists working are coming back. But a lot of people, the virtual thing is there to stay. A lot of people are doing it as part of what they do still. So.
Yeah.
So like many industries, the pandemic forced people into different avenues, and they found that this was a good solution, and so they are sticking a lot with it.
I listened to different podcasts and read articles on that. Essentially, what the pandemic did for business was it sped up by a factor of 10 years where we were already headed.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, prior to that, were there caricaturists doing virtual caricatures? Was that like a thing, or was it something that really was born out of the pandemic?
I think it would be fair to say it was born out of the pandemic. I mean, I had not heard of that sort of thing very often. The closest thing was the corporate kind of experiences that they had started doing online, like wine lessons and cooking lessons and things like that. They would bring people in and virtually, and these agencies would have a menu of different personalities or different people with different skills. And caricature artists were starting to pop up in that, I thought. But the switch to a more digital approach had certainly started happening long before the pandemic. Like, I know a lot of live caricature artists were going in to do and would work on iPads or some other type of digital tablet instead of paper, and have a little printer and would print up. And then people would put them on their, like for trade shows, put them on their name tags.
Oh, wow.
Or, that hang them with a lanyard, and they would have a monitor set up so people could watch them draw, mirroring it, So that was definitely something that was becoming real big. And then, of course, switching that to a virtual solution was kind of just the next generation of that.
Yeah.
Do you miss going to shows?
No, I don't. I still
the reason I
ask every once in a while, but go ahead.
Well, the reason I ask is because Jake and I both have done our share of comic conventions and stuff, and it was never I enjoy meeting people the first day, but then it drags on, and I'm like, I can't wait for it to be over.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do Comic-Cons, not very many, but I still do those, and I'm going to go back to doing them now that they're live. I don't mind Comic-Cons. I actually enjoy them because I don't do too many. Okay. I do maybe 3 or 4 a year at most.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do like that. And that's different. That's where people commission me. They come up, if they want to caricature themselves, I take a picture of them on my iPad and tell them when they come back and get it. And then I get to take my time and do whatever I want. It's when somebody sits down in front of you and you got like 5 minutes to bang that out and send them on their way. And there's a huge line of people waiting. That I don't miss, going to theme parks or doing them at some corporate event or something. I don't do that too often anymore, but Comic-Cons, I still like that. It's always fun to meet the people that read your work, and get a chance to actually, interact with people who enjoy what you do. And because, you guys know, you do your thing at home in your studio and off it goes, and, you get feedback, but it's just sort of like you create it in a vacuum, and yet your work is enjoyed in all over the world. So I don't mind Comic-Cons, but if I had to do more than, a handful a year, I would absolutely have a problem with that, I think.
So
Well, since you, oh, go ahead, Jake.
No, you go ahead.
Well, so you mentioned, it's more enjoyable to have your time, take a picture, and to spend some time with it. I look at your work and I'm like, this is a guy who is at the top of the caricature world. I love your Jack Black for some reason. I just, I mean, I love so many of them, but I'm thinking like for me, I've never done caricatures, and I've never sat down and tried to do them because I know I'm not good at it. This is, not my thing. But I'm thinking as a listener, like even where you're at right now, you say you don't like doing it, but do you get nervous at all? Like sitting there, like, am I going to be able to make the person happy when they see the final result? Does that enter in at all?
No, I stopped being nervous about it after like the first 10 years I did it full time.
Okay.
Well, it took 10 years to get over that.
I mean, I started, my first job in art was doing caricatures at a theme park near Chicago, Great America. It's a Six Flags now. And that was in 1985. I was 18.
Wow.
And that was my summer job. And wow. I couldn't believe I was getting paid to draw,
Yeah.
And so, and I wasn't very good, I was just a first year, kid, trying to get likenesses and do funny stuff. And, but the people that, buy those sort of things, they honestly really don't know the difference between a good and a bad drawing anyway. So it's mostly the advice of your peers and the the other artists you work with. If they tell you, oh boy, you really missed that guy, he had a long skinny face and you did, and then you go, it's too bad. But if they tell you that was a great drawing, that was one of the best ones you did all day, then you can, you kind of take that to heart. So I was able to separate the customer from, customer's opinion, because you would get people returning drawings, every once in a while that weren't happy with it. I mean, you're making fun of them, you're drawing a caricature of them and trying to get them to pay you for it. That's a tough gig.
Right.
And
they knew what they were signing up for usually, right? Like
you would think so, but that isn't always the case. Yeah, that isn't always the case. But you would get people that would sometimes, return the drawing, even though it was the best drawing you did all day. And then you would get people that would buy a frame and rave about this drawing that you did, that you're so embarrassed you didn't even sign your name to it. You just scribbled something that sort of looked like a signature, and
no one could trace it back to you.
Yeah, because these are fast. You got to do them in 5 to 8 minutes, and it's great. I have always appreciated the time I spent doing that, because I think that's how I really developed my instinct for drawing faces and capturing expression and stuff, doing that fast, very responsive, no time to think about it, just have to process it sort of work. Even though it's, kind of hit and miss sometimes, but you really develop your skills with likenesses and especially expression, because it's sort of like learn how to draw doing figure drawing, instead of doing 3-hour poses, you do, 10-second studies with the figure, and you develop your instinct with the figure a lot better. Maybe your little studies you're not going to frame those, but you're developing your instincts with the figure. And then when you go to do a longer piece, and you got the better tools for it. So live caricature is a great discipline, something that is a lot of fun too sometimes.
So you mentioned, on one end there's doing live caricature, and then on the other end, it's doing like, professional caricatures for publications. What's the spectrum? Is the full spectrum there? Is like, where do editorial cartoons fit in? Where does Mad Magazine, may it rest in peace, fit in? I don't know. Did it come back, or is it really gone?
It's pretty much gone.
Okay.
I mean, it does. They do publish a magazine that says Mad every other month, but it's all classic material. Yeah. They have a new cover, and then they've got a guy named Johnny Sampson who's really talented. Took over the fold in from Al Jaffe, because that guy, he's only 101. You think he'd be able to, get off his lazy butt and do one piece every other month, but whatever. So he's retired.
Yeah.
And so there is a new fold in. And then they very occasionally have some new piece that's in there. Like we did a couple issues ago, they did a Batman issue, and I did the cover with Pattinson's Batman. And then they had us do a 2-page spread on the inside that was brand new. That was the little goof on, all the takes on Batman over the years. So they do sometimes do some new stuff, but really it's pretty much just reprint.
Okay.
But to get back to your question, caricature is so incredibly versatile. And I kind of lucked into it. I got this job when I was going to school for art. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I loved comics, but I wasn't sure I had the chops to, do Superman or something like that. And I'd always liked to do more humorous based stuff. And I didn't think there was a lot of work for that out there in the 80s. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was big and that sort of thing. But there really wasn't a lot of humor comics. So I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I could do advertising work. So I was going to college for art and I got this job. And I really took to caricature. It was something that I really enjoyed doing it. I thought I had kind of a knack for it. Turned out it was a great tool to have in my toolbox as an illustrator, because when you do illustration work for whatever, any kind of media, almost everything ultimately is about people or somebody, and so being able to do a likeness of somebody is a really great thing to be able to do, especially if you can do something that isn't photographic, that's got another element to it. And then within that, there's a big spectrum in caricature. So let's say I might get called on to do a piece, magazine illustration of a article on a politician that's very critical of that person, right? So they want me to do a mean guy caricature, like make him look really stupid or nasty or whatever. Then I might also get a job the next day doing a caricature of some athlete for Sports Illustrated Kids, and they don't want me to make him look terrible. Right. They just want it to be fun and whimsical and humorous, without being derogatory. So you can do kind of fits a lot of different applications. And Mad is kind of a special situation. That's that magazine and that publication had always been known for its caricature since the 50s. And so being able to work for them was really a big deal for me. I was a huge fan as a kid, of course, and getting to be in it with a lot of my cartooning heroes was pretty special. And like you said, there's so many other places. Editorial cartoonists, are some of the best caricaturists you'll find, because they have to boil the face down to like a couple of lines and make it recognizable. And it's always fun to watch the progression of the editorial cartoonists with the new president, because it always starts out, it's a little bit too detailed and things aren't quite right. And then people start unlocking things about the person. And the next thing you know, at the end of their term, it's like 3 lines and that's Bush, or whatever, because it's not only they've trained us, right, to recognize it, as well as they've learned how to boil it down to the simplest of elements. So, caricature is a great discipline. It's just got so many places you can see it and use it.
That's cool.
So, a lot of our listeners are younger artists or artists that are switching careers or looking to kind of get into illustration. What do you see as the maybe talk about what it would take to get into it, what you would do maybe differently if you were trying to break in now, maybe some of the mistakes you made, and
what would you tell some artist who's like thinking caricature could be a career option, like today, what would they do here in 2022?
Yeah. Well, I started at a time where there was still an awful lot of publication work. a lot of print. And there was just so many opportunities in the print world at that time. That's not the case anymore.
Right.
There's so few magazines, there's so few publications that are in print now. It's difficult to get the same kind of pay for stuff that's only online. So, I mean, really, ultimately, getting into it is kind of the same as it was when I was back in the 80s when I was starting to get into it. My advice would be get as good as you can get at it, because no matter what happens, the cream always rises to the top. The people that are really exceptionally skilled and have great work are going to find places to get to use that work and have people pay them for that work. Live caricatures is really a wonderful way to pay the bills. It's not the most glamorous thing in the world, when you're drawing at bar mitzvahs or some company's holiday party or something.
You're earning that paycheck.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the theme park gigs and retail gigs like that are also pretty tough to do. They pays the bills. I didn't just start making money as an illustrator, out of college. I opened my own caricature theme park operations. At one point in the 90s, I had 7 operations in 4 different states, and I probably had 100 artists working for me.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
I was at 2 Six Flags parks, Six Flags in St. Louis, Six Flags out in New England. That's by Springfield, Massachusetts. And then Valley Fair, which is kind of a Six Flags-like park here in Minnesota, and at the Mall of America, and a couple of places in Atlanta, and another place in St. Louis, and down in New Orleans for a while too. So I had this big business going, and that really paid my bills and got us financially stable while I was building up my freelance clientele. And I did some work for comics. I did work for a comic company called Now Comics out of Chicago for about six years. I pretty steadily worked for them on a title called Married with Children, which was based on the TV show. They did a lot of licensing stuff. They did the Green Hornet, and they did the Ghostbusters cartoon comics, and a couple other ones. And they had the license for Married with Children. And that was just a bizarre, weird comic book. It was kind of Mad Magazine, zany, just the Bundys in comics of all things. That doesn't make any sense, but I guess it did pretty well for them. I did it for like 6 years. I must have done 30 issues or something like that over the courses. Maybe more than that. Then I did a little miniseries for Marvel, and I started doing magazine work. Small local magazines. Eventually, just kind of built my clientele up from there. So it's a long road as a freelancer. I never had a rep. I never had an agent. Everything I did was just my own, word of mouth and sending my stuff out to publishers and that sort of thing. And getting into MAD was a big deal, because MAD sort of opened the doors to a lot of other places, because everybody knows MAD Magazine. So you say, "Oh, I work for MAD Magazine," and people be like, "Oh, okay, yeah."
Because everybody knows MAD. Everybody's had at least bought an issue, or at least
everybody does. I mean, even young people, you say today, they usually just think it's the Cartoon Network show or something. They don't know it was they don't know it was a magazine, but it still kind of resonates today. But I've gotten tons of jobs because I work for Mad Magazine. People, follow me through the magazine or whatever. Yeah. So that was a great thing for me.
So what was your caricature business model?
That's where I was going to go.
Yeah, because I'm just curious how you made that work.
Well, one of our themes that we talk about, the three of us often, is that if you're not entrepreneurial as an artist, you won't ever get paid as much as if you work for yourself.
Right. Well, I didn't originate the template. I basically copied the guys who I had worked for. I worked for a company called Foz Arts that did caricatures and they also did airbrush t-shirts and face painting at a number of parks. And I worked for them in Chicago. Then when I graduated from college, they hired me to manage a new operation for them, and they had opened up at Six Flags in Atlanta. So I went down to Atlanta and was there for 2 summers. And then I came back to Minnesota and started opening up my own shops. But you build a booth, you put tables with a bench in front of it, and you hire talented people and pay them as much as you can pay them, and put samples on the wall and prices up there, and off you go. So the artists that worked for me were independent contractors. That was the way that. So they were essentially freelancers, and they got paid a percentage of their drawing. And that's how I did it with these guys, and that's how I did it with my operations. And it works out pretty good because the artists they make money depending on their productivity. So and then they're freelance, so
they have little risk. They don't take on as much risk, right? So that's a good foot in the door for them because they can just show up and do it.
Right. The business is provided to them. I'm sort of like their rep, and I keep putting their clients in front of them, and they keep selling them their art. So their investment in it is their time and talent, of course, and then they have to provide their own equipment, so an airbrush or whatever it is that they use. But that's a very small investment. It's like a piece of paper costs 10 cents.
Right.
Yeah. The paint you use to paint on it probably a couple pennies, and you sell it for $25. So
yeah.
So so if you're looking for that job today, if and you want to get your foot in the door, how do you find that job? Like how do you land that job with someone?
If you're looking for it, the best way to go is to just if there's a place nearby you, like a Six Flags park or something like that, just contact the park and say, who does your caricatures? And they'll give you the person's name, and you can go there, show them your work, and get a summer job. That really is an awesome, if you can invest a summer doing it and you really want to learn how to do caricatures, I couldn't recommend going to a theme park more. So if you find one that does good stuff, some caricatures, operations are more cookie cutter. They sort of teach people a generic kind of face,
and here's an eye, here's a wide eye, here's a narrow eye.
Yeah, when you go to a park and you're looking at, there's multiple artists drawing, and all of them seem to be drawing the same style. That's not a very good environment, in my opinion. I always encourage people to draw their own style. So, like, we didn't have a house style. A lot of times people would end up copying me just because I'm the person they watch draw, and but they always would end up going kind of off in their own direction. So, and it made it fun for us too, because we'd have this guy over here maybe was more portraity, didn't exaggerate as much. And this gal over here had a crazy cartoon style that just was like, the Fairly Odd Parents sort of thing with big googly eyes and stuff like that. And they were able to capture a likeness and get a good caricature of a person despite of wide variety of style. And it would run in the retail biz. It would we run afoul of customers sometimes because they might be watching the portraity guy and say, "Oh, let's get a caricature," and then they'd sit down in front of the gal that does the goofy cartoons, and when they see what she did, they'd be like, "Oh, that's not what I expected." But usually they're watching, and we have samples on the wall. Everybody has different samples, So
you know what you're kind of know what you're signing up for.
Well, you should probably watch the artist do a drawing before you actually get one done. Yeah. That's probably a good rule of thumb in caricature in general.
Yeah. So if I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have a portfolio of caricatures, but the Six Flag, the summer job thing sounds like fun, but I'm not ready for that. Would you recommend like going to a mall and just drawing for free, just having people sit down and drawing them or something like that?
That's kind of tough. The mall probably wouldn't cotton to that too well. My advice is just to go to a coffee shop, set up in a coffee shop and just draw people. You don't have to even give it to them. Just do
Just
live
fill a
drawings of
sketchbook.
people. Yeah, yeah. The more you can do live, the better, because then you're getting used to seeing in 3 dimensions, and you're registering shapes and elements of the face in real time instead of studying a photograph, which
Right.
is different. And that would help immensely in being able to do live stuff. And then the other thing I recommend to people is volunteer. Go to your local elementary school or something and volunteer to draw at their you know
Like their carnival or
yeah,
something.
their carnivals or something that they do just for free.
Yeah.
And so that then where you're sanctioned and people are saying, yeah, go ahead and set up and draw, instead of like doing stealth
It's not
drawings
creepy.
at the food court, that probably get you into trouble. Yeah.
What are some, like, are there any red flags to watch out for when you go work for one of these caricature booth companies? Like, is there ever anybody like taking advantage of artists, or is there a certain percentage that's too high that they're taking? Like, what are things to look out for?
Well, sure, of course, there's always going to be, the problem with theme parks is that the theme park themselves take a huge chunk.
Mm,
So it's difficult to pay, a top dollar for that sort of thing. The best way to make money doing it is to do, gigs at, for companies or people where they pay you and by the hour and you just draw people. So,
I see. Yeah.
at that's the best way to do it, because you can charge like, 150, $200 an hour, and
Hmm.
you're only going to draw for 2.5, 3 hours maybe, but
Right.
it's a pretty good payday for that shorter period of time.
Right.
Whereas at the theme parks, you're going to work, an 8-hour day and draw a lot and get paid a lot less per drawing or per
Hmm.
face or whatever. But yeah, you probably want to be. I would want to be in a situation where you have the opportunity to make some decent money.
Hmm.
Uh, they ought to be paying you at least a third,
Hmm.
of each drawing.
Okay.
In my opinion, I mean, even though the theme parks have jacked up their rates over the years, I still start people out at between 30 and 35% for a first year
Hmm.
person.
Hmm.
I mean, they don't have much of an investment. All the expenses are really on my end, and the park is bringing all the people in, but they're the
Hmm.
talent. They're the people that are actually producing the thing, and they ought to get their fair share of it.
Right.
So I would say that, and then talk to a couple of the artists that work there and find out if they're happy.
That's true. Yeah.
Another thing is that you got to have a good support system. Like
Hmm.
if I'm the owner of a caricature concession, I want to make sure my artists have all the tools and have the best opportunity to be able to, to be successful. So when you go to an operation, they say, "Oh man, we're always out of this, and we're always out of that." That obviously that owner, whoever's in charge, isn't paying attention, and it's just like
Yeah.
that's no good. So you want to make sure that they've got all the supplies they need and everything's cool out there, and
Hmm.
everything's functioning, and they reinvest in the business, that sort of thing.
I know
Yeah.
we're kind of stuck on caricatures, but it's interesting to me because I've seen the operations, but I've never known what goes on behind the scenes. How many drawings would an artist do in a day? Maybe
Oh, that depends so much.
high end,
On the
low end.
on the day, and also on how fast the artist is.
Mm,
If it's not a day that you get rained out or something, at like a festival or something, if it's just a regular day and it's a decent business, and you got to be able to do 20 or 25 faces in a day. But
hmm
I've done 100 faces a day.
Wow.
Yeah, when I was young and had a lot of energy, and we'd work
Wow.
14-hour days, start at 10 a.m. and be done at
Uh-huh.
midnight.
Yeah.
Those were just nuts. But
That
we
is
were
a
only
day.
charging, it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. We were only getting $10 a face or something.
Oh
So
wow.
So where do you want to be time wise? Like, what's a good place to be in to finish a caricature? a live caricature?
I think between maybe about 5 to 8 minutes, I think
Wow.
is a good speed. That's pretty quick. If you could do something in like sub 5 minutes is sort of a hallmark of live caricature. Something that's
Wow.
sub 5 minutes is a pretty quick drawing. Now I know some artists that do them in 2 minutes, but but to be quite honest with you, they look like they did them in 2 minutes. You
The
know,
really
so
fat marker.
yeah. So my rule of thumb has always been I don't want to do you know compromise drawings really fast, nor do I want to do really super elaborate drawings really slow.
Right.
Those are two ends of the spectrum that aren't really if you're doing them too fast and you're doing crappy drawings, that's a disservice to your customer. And if you're
Right.
taking forever to do them, that's a disservice to you because you're getting paid by the drawing maybe. So you want to find that happy medium. Do good drawings quickly, basically.
Right. And then
is the best.
like another factor is like the people sitting there too. They're going to get antsy after the 10-minute mark, right? Like,
Yeah. Honestly, a live caricature artist, the best of them are as good at the banter and the showmanship as they are at the art.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, I can do it. I can put on the show if I have to and make jokes and make everybody laugh and do all that stuff. It's not my favorite thing. I'd rather just shut up and draw, but you
Yes.
can't just do that if you want to, because there's an interactive quality to it. There's an entertainment factor.
It's a live performance.
Exactly.
on
So the really
one
good
hand.
caricature artists do really good drawings, but also really entertain both the people that are sitting in front of them and the people behind them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the toolkit for a caricaturist? What are you wanting to invest in as far as tools?
Well, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, you could do it with anything.
Okay.
I know I use a really soft lead pencil, like a 4B, and it's kind of a big fat. It's like a 3mm lead.
Oh,
And then
wow.
I use a blending stomp to do a little shading, and then when I do them in color, I use an airbrush, and freehand airbrush color on top. Now I know a lot of artists that work in marker, and they use different kinds of markers. You can, if you really want to get a live caricature artist ranting about something, ask them about their markers they use, and they'll immediately start going off on how they don't make them anymore, or they don't make them like they used to, or all artists have that problem, right? Like You
Right.
talk about your tools, and you're like, oh, the ink, they discontinued the ink I use, and now I have to use this other crap, and it's terrible.
It's weird. It seems like art supplies, because there's a pencil I used to draw with that they don't make. They changed the recipe or whatever it is for that lead. And it's true. It's a true thing. There's like a 20-year lifespan for a certain kind of tool, and if you get in on the last 3 years of that, you're like, well, I got to find something new.
Well, I'm sure you've heard the Easterbrook 914 story, right? The Charles Schultz story.
No, tell it. I
Okay,
think I
so-
have, but tell it.
So Charles Schultz, Peanuts cartoonist, used one ink nib, the Easterbrook 914 radio, Easterbrook Radio 914, and he had been told by the company that they had discontinued it, and so he called up the company and every art supply place like in Southern California, and he bought every Easterbrook 914 that there was in stock everywhere, and he hoarded them all. And he never ran out of them. He used them until the day he did his last strip. But so
Wow.
that's how obsessive artists can be about their
I heard that about
tools.
Glenn Keane too, that he I guess Blackwing pencils there was a period there where they just stopped making them. And so he had done the same sort of hoarding thing where he's like, well, I've got a lifetime supply. So
I'll have to ask him about that. I'm real good friends with his brother Jeff Keane, who does the Family Circus now.
Yeah.
Took that over from their dad, and he's a member of the Cartoonist Society I'm a member of, and we've been on some USO trips together. So I've met Glenn a few times, but I have to add, next time I see him, I'll ask him about that. That's funny.
Yeah, ask him if it's a true story or if if it's apocryphal, like if I just heard it somewhere.
That's great.
That's interesting. How do you how would someone get into like the higher end publication type of work? How do you do that transition from doing the live drawing to I assume is that your bread and butter now is more like these illustration gigs?
Yeah. I've been I haven't done, made a living with live caricature in 15 years probably.
Oh yeah.
But it's a tough transition to make for a live caricature artist because I get that question a lot from like theme park caricature artists or party caricaturists say, hey, I want to do work for, magazines or whatever. How do I get into it? Mm-hmm. And the first thing you have to do is realize that this, that's been their whole world for most of their career is only this much of what you're going to do,
Yeah.
The illustration is about narrative and it's about storytelling and it's about, getting ideas across in communication. And while caricature can be a big part of that, you're not just going to be doing faces. You have to be able to you incorporate your caricature into that narrative of some kind. So that's the other thing. I basically say you better be able to draw like bicycles and, feet and things like that. Because you can't just do, head and shoulder shots for magazines. It's not going to work.
Right.
But otherwise you got to just go out and find clients. That's the hard part of any freelancer's career. Go find a place and go find people that want to use your work, and the type of thing that you do. And, today it's a lot harder because there's not very many People magazines and, Us magazine and all these entertainment magazines that used to use caricature all the time. Mm-hmm. And now they're all gone. So, you sort of have to go out and find clients and find things that you can use to, find people who need your work. And that's it's always the big challenge. But the things that you can do as an illustrator is to create work that people want to buy, so put your portfolio together, show art directors that you're not just about the head and shoulders, I have a story actually that kind of illustrates that. There was this guy that used to work for me doing caricatures at the theme park. And he came up to me one day and he said, hey, I've got a job. I've gotten my first real magazine illustration job. It's for a local Twin Cities, Minneapolis magazine. And they're doing a story about the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, who at the time was a guy named Dennis Green. And so they want me to do a caricature of him. And I said, well, that's great. How did you get that gig? And he says, well, I went to the publication. They have an office, and I went and saw the art director and showed him my portfolio. And I said, can I see your portfolio? So he said, sure. And he's showing it to me. And he had some full of a lot of different weirdness, but he had these caricatures that were, I don't know how to explain them. They're kind of a cross between David Levine, cross hatching, and sort of like almost like they were woodcut. Like the cross hatchings were big, thicker lines. And it was quite a cool effect actually. And he said, yeah, they really liked these in particular. I said, okay. And he said, what kind of advice can you give me? And I said, well, just feel them out, see what it is they want, and ask them what the purpose of the illustration's for, and read the story and try to create an image that communicates what that story's all about. And so he did this piece, and he came back to me and he says, okay, I've got it done. And he showed me a Head and Shoulders caricature of Dennis Green that was like a theme park caricature. It was airbrushed and it looked like something he would have done at the park. Yeah. And I was like, Mike, they're not going to like that because this is what they liked in your portfolio, right? This is what you showed them. And now you're going to give them something completely different. He says, no, they'll like it. They did not like it. They paid him the kill fee for it and never got published. And, so what you need to do is, put together work that people are really interested in in buying, and then go find people to buy it. It sounds like, oh, that's easy, but it isn't.
Right.
It's really, really hard.
Right.
That's why a lot
Yeah.
of, it's tough to make a living as a freelancer.
I mean, that tracks with, half of our episodes are answering questions we get from listeners. And at least one question per episode is, I'm not getting work. Look at my portfolio. What what am I doing wrong? And it's always like, it's either there's this massive range of things that they're doing. I could do your logo design. I can also do, caricatures, but I can also do industrial design, and I could do comic covers, and it's like, pick one, maybe two, and that's your thing. And then the other thing is we'll just see like, two pieces that are amazing, but the rest looks like student work.
Well, or two pieces that are good, but in the market they want to compete in, they have to be great.
Yeah.
To really take work from someone else. And so,
Right.
so it's never, this portfolio is completely amazing and there's nothing wrong with it. It's never like that.
Those people are getting work.
Yeah. But the sad thing is that in order to get that portfolio, you have to be getting work to hone your craft to get there. So it is really a double-edged sword. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I liked your comment earlier about being an entrepreneur, and that's where I think it really is at these days, is that you've got to go out and figure out how to make money with your art these days, that you just don't, start getting clients and start doing it. You have to reinvent yourself every once in a while. And when my magazine work started drying up, and I wasn't getting as many gigs that way, I had to come up with other ways to to try to make money, and I started doing these workshops. So I would travel around and do these weekend workshops to teach people caricature, and then ended up being a nice little side business for me.
Yeah.
And I started doing these things. Of course, I couldn't do them during the pandemic, and I haven't really started back up with it. But for a while there, I was doing 6 or 8 workshops a year, just in different places. And they were small. It'd only be like 12 students.
Yeah.
There's some good pictures on your site that I was looking at.
That's such a cool thing, because if you're like, I really want to get into this, I have a knack for it, but I don't know a single art teacher who teaches this, and boom, you're like going to be an hour away for, how long is your workshop? Like
it's a 2-day workshop. Yeah. Like Saturday, Sunday, usually.
Yeah, man, I'd be signing up for that in a heartbeat and checking that out. It's
fun because
cool.
it's hard to find instruction. I mean, these days there's videos all over the place, and you can find videos to teach you anything. But to really get to work one-on-one with somebody and watch them do it, and get to ask them questions in real time and have them respond to your work and watch you do it. There's not very many places to do that, so it's, and it's inefficient, because I've got to get on a plane and fly somewhere and, set it all up and get a hotel and get a room that we can do it in and all that stuff. So it's not the most, easy thing to coordinate and put together, but it actually ended up being a nice little side gig, like I said, and I found I enjoyed teaching.
That's cool. Yeah.
I like working with artists, and it's fun to watch people light up when you say something to them that clicks, and they just sort of have that look in their eye, like, oh yeah, okay. And people don't develop their skills over 2 days, but you certainly can open their eyes to certain concepts, and my goal always is to have them looking at faces differently in at the end of the weekend than they did when they came in, which usually that's accomplished. Most people are pretty happy with the workshop over the weekend, and it's a lot of fun.
You teach them how to see, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the tough part.
So I'm wondering who, I see influences in your work, but I'm curious, like, who are your top 3 or 5 favorite artists?
Well, obviously the old Mad guys,
Hmm.
would be right up there. Most people assume Mort Drucker for me because my work has a lot of similarities to what he did.
Hmm.
I'm more likeness orientated and not less exaggerated than most people, and
Right.
there's sort of a kind of a cinematic quality to what I do, which is reminiscent of his stuff. But Jack Davis really was a lot more of an influence on me,
Hmm.
cartooning wise. I always the high energy of his work was something, and the more exaggerated qualities of his figures and stuff was always something that
I
really
see that in
amazed
like your
me.
poses and like the
Mhm.
expression, the silhouette and stuff.
I try to do that, yeah, and that's definitely Davis stuff.
Hmm.
As far as illustration goes, I found like a lot of people discovered Andrew Loomis's books
Uh-huh.
um, when I was younger, and I just was fascinated by that guy because he could do anything. And my favorite Loomis book is Fun with a Pencil, which is just
Hmm.
this goofy little comic, cartoon thing that he threw together. But it's just so expressive and fun,
Right.
and just shows this how you can be a really serious artist and illustrator and just have this goofy humorous side.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that Wally Wood is probably one of my favorite cartoonists and right up there in
Mm-hmm.
my top three, because he was the
Mm-hmm.
same way. He was like the modern day Loomis. Like he could do really realistic stuff and incredible figure work, and had great realistic comic book style and cartooning style. But
Yeah.
when he was funny, he was nobody was funnier. He just was just outrageous with his cartoon work and mad, and his
Yeah. His
humorous
light
stuff
and
was fantastic.
shadow was like
Yeah, he's a master
impressive.
of black and white.
Hmm.
Just cast shadows, solid blacks.
Hmm.
He was fearless. I mean, I wish I had half the guts he has to cover up whole parts of a figure, in nothing but black, and still make it work by putting the light behind it and stuff. It's
Hmm.
just he was a genius.
Have you seen like Frazetta's ink stuff, like somewhat cartoony stuff that he's done too?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
has
Frazetta
some of
was
that
another
flair.
guy and they all knew each other.
Hmm.
That's the crazy thing. They all like went to the SVA together or whatever, that high school.
Mm.
Will Elder and Al Jaffe and
Uh-huh.
Frazetta and um, oh, my dog is mad that he's not in here. I have to let him in.
Let him in. My dog just came in and sniffed around and then left.
Come on in, buddy. Okay.
I saw the doggy bed back there, and I'm like, I wonder what kind of dog goes in there.
Well, I
Yeah.
got two. Actually, you can't see the other bed. It's behind the desk. But I got two little dogs. They're about 20 pounds each, so they're not very big.
Oh, nice.
They're my studio buddies, and they come in here and sack out in the beds while I'm busy working. And
I was
it's
going to
fun.
ask you, what about contemporary artists? Who do you really look up to? That's a peer pop, that you're working with.
Oh boy, there was a guy who worked with Mad for a long time, and now he just does fine art. His name was Herman Mejia. Are you familiar with him?
No.
No.
He's a Venezuelan artist. Uh, God, he's just so good with caricature. I mean, I always graduate or gravitate towards caricature artists just because, that's kind of my thing. But oh man, Herman was really really good. Well, he is really really good. Now he does gallery shows and stuff.
Mm,
That's really really fantastic. But his work for Matt always blew me away. Um,
yeah.
Honestly, don't follow comics too much anymore, like mainstream comics. So I sad to say I don't have a lot of
Hmm.
favorites right now. In that uh, Peter DeSev
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
is another illustrator whose stuff is always blows me away. And you know how it is, where sometimes you've got an artist who does something that is similar to what you do, and
Hmm.
but he's better, and you think like, wow, that's where I want to be. But there are other artists whose work completely different from me, you know, and they just, I can't quite wrap my head around how they're seeing these things and what they're doing. And it's just like this really alien culture but it still amazes and fascinates me.
Yeah.
So Peter is sort of like that. Like what he does is just beautiful. His color work is just mind boggling, and I love his stuff.
You and him seem like you found the fountain of youth. You guys both look 10 years younger than you actually are.
I've never met Peter. I'd love
really?
to meet him someday. Yeah.
He looks really young.
I used to work at Blue Sky, so he would, he was in the art department there, and I'd see him whenever he was in and stuff. Super cool guy. I was always like kind of nervous, like, oh, I don't want to like interrupt his inspiration or his flow or anything.
Yeah, it's so fun to run into his work too. We were in New York a couple of years ago, and we went to a show, and he had done all the art for the show.
Oh wow!
All the the posters, everything was his stuff. Instantly recognizable, of course. His stuff is like you just see a little portion of it, you go, oh, it's Peter stuff. But that's great. I'm trying to come up with some other names, and I'm just blanking.
Carter
on
Goodrich. You familiar with his stuff?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
You've seen it.
You've seen. He's like he got the gig doing character design for animated films, and
like Open Season.
Yeah, he's an illustrator, but then
Carter Goodrich did some of the character designs for Open Season and for Ratatouille, and
I'm sure I've seen his stuff then.
Yeah,
he's super cool. I was going to ask you, did you, in this whole thing, you never mentioned art school? Did you do art school, or are you like a self-taught like phenom?
No, I went to art school.
Okay.
I went to a tiny little art school in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's now defunct, but it was called the School of Associate Arts at the time. It was actually just in an old mansion in the Cathedral Hill area of St. Paul, and I think there were about maybe 18 students in my graduating class.
So you're like an X-Men of artists.
Sort of, yeah.
That's true.
I wish one of my instructors would have been a bald guy in a wheelchair. That would have been awesome.
Which X-Men are you then? Are you?
I don't know.
Are you a Cyclops, a Wolverine, a Beast?
I don't know. I guess I'm probably more of a Colossus.
Yeah.
Big, dumb, and clumsy. So that was my education in art, but I learned nothing about cartooning. There were zero cartooning classes. In fact, my
more foundational stuff.
Yeah, my illustration instructors frowned on cartooning. I remember that I had this guy who was like my junior year illustration instructor, and I had been doing caricatures then for a couple of summers. I would go to school, and then I would go do caricatures for the summer, and I'd come back to Minnesota and do school. And I actually did caricatures at like nightclubs and bars and stuff on weekends to make money during the school year.
Oh, nice.
And this guy took me aside and he said, "Look, you're never going to make any money as a cartoonist. For every single person that wants to be a cartoonist, there's like 10,000 people that don't make a living. So what you got to do is you got to learn how to draw products." So he showed me his portfolio of stuff where he drew tractors for Menards ads and things like that, sandwiches and all that stuff. This is where the money's at. I'm going to go home and draw a tractor trailer for a circular newspaper ad tonight and make like $500. He said, "That's what you need to learn how to do." He had no idea what was coming. Nobody did, of course,
the
at the
death
time.
of newspapers.
Right.
Yeah, the product illustration was going to be taken over by, photography and Photoshop and all that stuff. And I ran into him years later when after I had been working for MAD for a while, and I said, "Well, I guess I'm one of the 1 in 10,000 people. I feel pretty damn lucky."
Did he? That's so great.
You know what's funny is I've met a lot of artists who were hated or disliked or unappreciated at their school by their faculty. The It's just so funny how often that happens where, you're told you'll never X fill in the blank. Like Ryan Wood was, he worked for Disney for a while, but he was told by one of his high school teachers that you'll never make any money drawing these stupid skulls, because he was drawing skulls on stuff. So then he started putting a small little skull in every painting that he did for all of his freelance work. And you have to look for them, you have to like really zoom in to find them, but they're anyway.
That was sort of like, screw you, I'm gonna make this work. It's funny because you tell it to one. I think the people that are going to succeed are the ones who it doesn't matter what you tell them. Like, quit drawing anime. Anime's not your, like, nobody's gonna hire you to do anime. And then the person who's like has it inside them, that fire, they're like, I'll show you.
They just use it as
I'll
fuel.
do anime.
Well, honestly, I was actually kind of glad that they didn't have any cartooning classes there, because it did force me to learn the fundamentals, and which I think just made the cartooning end of things stronger for me when I ended up gravitating towards the humorous side of things.
That's true, because you could have just really leaned on what was fun and easy for you, like and sort of atrophied in these other areas that you actually absolutely need to know. Because I look at your color stuff, your line work's great. I've been looking through your Instagram as we've been talking. Of course, your line work's amazing. I love it. Light and shadow is good, but then your color stuff is just top notch as well. It's all, anything you do, you're good at. So
thank you.
It's really cool.
I'll tell my wife you said that, because she won't agree, but that's okay.
Wives are the toughest critics, though.
They're so yeah. They tell it like it is.
Especially when they're mad at you for something else. Yeah. Then they're really good at being critics.
She thinks I'm pretty good at the art thing, but I'm not very good at like fixing stuff around the house and that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm that. Anytime I'm like, honey, I gotta finish. I'm gonna try and fix this myself, and she's like, okay, you could spend all day trying to fix that, or go do the thing that you're really good at and hire a guy who's really good at this to do the plumbing.
Yeah, that's probably wise.
Our other guy. Yeah, our other partner, Lee, who does the podcast with us, he honestly is like a jack of all trades, pretty darn good at all too. Like, so
wow.
Like one day he's like, oh, I ripped out my stairwell and I'm rebuilding stairs. I'm like, I would never take that project on. And he has all the tools and he does it. Okay, we're about done here. I wanted to ask you, I guess we'll close with this, if you're cool with that. Which Batman is the best Batman?
Ooh, that's tough, boy.
And I'm talking films, but I'm also curious if you have a favorite Batman time period in the comics as well.
Well, hands down, the animated Batman is the best Batman of any media Batmans. I mean, if you're counting cartoons, the Paul Dini, Bruce Timm cartoon was the best ever. If I had to pick a live action Batman, I think Ben Affleck actually kind of got a bad rap because he didn't really have a lot to work with. But I kind of like their take on the war weary kind of older Batman there. Yeah. Although I did really like the new film. I thought Pattinson did a pretty good job. The emo thing aside, I thought he was still pretty good. Well, my favorite Batman era of comics has got to be the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams era in the 70s. That was right when I was getting into comics, and they were it at the time. And
the yellow symbol and the blue cape, right?
Yeah. Some of that work was just phenomenal too. The Ra's al Ghul saga and that stuff still holds up, over the years later. And then I got out of comics for the longest time. And then my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, bought me the trade paperback edition of the Dark Knight Returns, the Frank Miller Batman.
Hmm.
series. And then I was like, wow, is this what comics are like now? I'm getting back. Because that was
Yeah.
about as good as it got too. So, but I'm one of those guys that can really appreciate the different Batmans. Like
Yeah.
I still have a fun, place in my heart for the Adam West show
Hmm.
that, really got me into comics as a little kid. And,
Hmm.
yeah, it was goofy and fun and campy, but that's what it was supposed to be. But I can
Yeah.
also appreciate the gritty take, like the new Batman movie. That's what's so great about that character. You can
Yeah.
take it
Did
from
you
all sorts of different angles.
did you ever see the Lego Batman movie?
I never did. I never
Okay, you
did.
got to put that on your list because you think, oh, it's I don't have time for this, but it is a solid Batman movie. It's a
Really,
really good
seriously.
Batman movie. Yeah, they treat it, they respect the source material, and then they
I
bring a
hear
lot
he's
of humor to
grouchy.
it. Yeah,
I hear that Lego Batman's really grouchy.
yeah, but
Is that
they
true?
do so much with that. It's solid. It's really good. So I
All right.
recommend that.
Well, that's on my list. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah. Thank
This
you.
has been great. We really
Yeah, nice to
appreciate
meet
it.
you.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
pleasure. Thanks for letting me be on the show. It's been fun.
All right, that was really cool. I like talking to that guy. I loved his stories. Totally opened me up to all the possibilities of what caricature is in that world.
Yeah.
I think it was a good follow up to that episode we did
Yeah.
about caricatures.
It's great. I love we touched on a little bit about being more entrepreneurial, and I get the sense that he's financially well off. Do you get that sense?
I get that sense, yeah. Like
mean, you can't
he's made
really-
some good financial decisions.
Yeah, you can't really say, "Hey, so what does your portfolio look like? What do you,
Yeah. What are you invested in?
yeah, what do you, yeah, and how much money do you have tucked under the mattress?" But, and part of that is that he, made some really good entrepreneurial decisions to take control of his financial future, and we like to talk about that a lot. And I think that that's more important now than it ever has been for artists in the day and age where you have access to tools that allow you to go directly to your audience. So yeah, I love that part of it.
Yeah, and the main thing too for him, I feel like was it didn't seem like he was just passively going through his career, but he was
Right.
like, oh, looking ahead 2 steps, saying, what do I need to do to stay afloat? What do I need to do to thrive as an illustrator? What do I need to make, to make it? And
Oh, there's some changes coming.
yeah.
What do I do to modify what I'm doing? Yeah. And that's something that I've heard. Really quick, I was talking to an artist when I was like 2 years out, 2 or 3 years as an illustrator. And I was doing really well in editorial illustration. And a veteran illustrator said, "You better be saving a lot of this money that you're making right now because it ain't going to last forever." And I'm sitting there going, how could it not last forever? I have no life experience at all, right? And I'm thinking, how could it not? And
This is
it
the
was
guy
only
who's
like-
been through 2 droughts and
yeah.
you're like, why? When the rain's done, the rain's gonna stop.
Yeah.
You know,
And
like-
it was only a few years later that editorial got flipped on its head by stock illustration and the internet and, all kinds of other market forces. And
Yeah.
that industry completely changed. Every place that I was making money dried up. And I had to make some big time changes and stuff. And so that was a good lesson to me. And it was neat to hear him talk about those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I'll take us out. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. 3 Point Perspective is brought to you by SVSLearn.com. That's where becoming a great illustrator starts. And your host today was me, Will Terry, and him, Jake Parker. No, I'm Jake Parker. He's Will Terry. And like we said, Lee White couldn't join us. He's out on assignment. But you can follow us over at willterry.com for Will Terry, LeeWhiteIllustration.com for Lee White, and MrJakeParker.com for myself. Podcast is produced by Daniel Tu. That's DanielTU.co. Special thanks to Master of Production David Bro, Keeper of the Curriculum Austin Shirtliff, Chief Operations Officer Lisa Fott, and a thank you to Lily Howell for our show notes. Now, go draw something.